Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. We've got lots to uncover today. We've got lots of royal drama, lots of goings on. We've got a celebrity death, and we're going to have a gossip about Gwynny towards the end again, because I've been hooked. I've got to confess, I've been watching the trial on YouTube, the Gwyneth trial, and finding it very revealing. And I'm sorry, my dear fruits, I know that we are divided on this issue, but I think any of you that are falling hook, line and sinker for Terry Sanderson's tale are bonkers, as Harry would put it, my dear. Bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. I'm firmly pitched to Team Gwynny, and if that means I lose half my subscribers, so be it, because I stand for the truth as I see it. So we will be looking at that again towards the end of the broadcast. But we will begin with much more pressing and much more regal matters, and that is the state visit of King Charles III to Germany, his first state visit. Together with Queen Camilla, they received a full ceremonial welcome after an astonishing military escort by 2 German fighter jets as their RAF Voyager entered German airspace. It was a unique gesture of honour, and they appeared at the top of the plane flanked by the King's equerry. Camilla in blue, Bruce Oldfield, and a hat by Philip Tracy. The King was smart in black, and the crowds went wild. There was a frenzy of Germanic fruits. Very excited, very welcoming. Were you there? Were you there to greet the King and the Queen? If you were, please do tell me how it was and how the atmosphere was. Lovely. On the Queen's breast was a brooch that once belonged to the late Elizabeth. And I will admit to you, my dears, that although Camilla's outfit is striking, it's not one of my favourites for her today. It's not. I feel that the two blues clash, and I don't like the texture of the fabric, the way that it's coming off. She's done so very well lately, and she still looks absolutely lovely. And it's not helped by the kind of glum weather that doesn't like things very well. But no, it wasn't one of my favourite looks, but a really lovely welcome. But before we press on with other matters royal, here in the kingdom, we're going through a shock death of a celebrity. Queen! A queen of a different kind. A drag queen. Paul O'Grady died suddenly last night at the age of 67, which is no age these days at all, is it, my dear? Still in the autumn season of life, but he went peacefully at the end of a very successful and fruitful life surrounded by love. So all in all, it is not a bad way to go when you think about it. And Queen Camilla, who worked very closely with Paul O'Grady and was very fond of him, full of affection for him, released a statement. The palace said that the Queen is deeply saddened to hear of the death of Paul O'Grady, who worked closely with Her Majesty in support of Battersea Dogs Home, providing lots of laughter and many waggy-tailed memories. For those fruits abroad who might be interested to know, Paul O'Grady is something of a national treasure here in the kingdom, who began off as... You see, he came to fame rather late in life. I think he was in his late 30s or 40s. Before that, he was infamous, I suppose you could say. He was an underground star of the drag world in his persona as Lily Savage, and he took the name Savage from his mother's maiden name, which I only found out today when I was reading his obituaries. His mother was called something or other Savage, and he took on that name and became a show called Savage, which played for 8 years at the RVT, the Royal Vauxhall Tavern. I'm not quite sure why that Vauxhall Tavern is royal. There's been a hell of a lot of queens in and out of it through the years, my dear, I can tell you that. And some palace walls. But I don't know how it acquired a royal name. But the RVT is a legendary venue and melting pot in London, in Vauxhall. And once upon a time, and in his day, it thronged and vibed with what the gay community once was, which were more joyous times, less politically correct times. And when you would go to watch these raw, edgy cabarets, you know, before the time of political correctness, and it was a sense of freedom, and people like Paul O'Grady were fighting for equalities which had yet to be reached. Of course, the moment they were reached, then nefarious other types came in, hijacked the whole affair, and turned the letters community into something really quite different. But it was about speaking as you find, bawdy, raucous comedy, dangerous comedy, stuff that made you gasp in shock and horror, but there was no cancel culture. There was no social media to run to and get on with things, this, that and the fourth. And the likes of Paul O'Grady, he was tame in comparison to many of these drag queens of yore. I have a very young relative who went to his first drag queen cabaret, straight relative, over the last couple of years, and he came away rather disappointed because he'd heard about, the legendary drag queens of yore and how spiky and cutting and acidic and silly that many could be. And there are many talented ones now, but you simply don't have the freedom to do what was once done by the likes of, even in America, RuPaul, Lady Bunny, if you listen to some of their old podcasts together. Very, very naughty. And that naughtiness, I'm afraid, must be out there somewhere, but it's missing in action. So that was how Paul O'Grady came up on the scene in these seedy bars and clubs, and he based his character, I believe a lot of it was influenced by somebody who I talk to you about quite a lot, and that is the character of Bette Lynch, played by Julie Goodyear. Get it? Got it? Good. Yes, the leopard skin, the high hair, a lot of that was based around that same iconic character. And there was something about him and his drag that sort of bridged the world of old drag and the Danny LaRue's of the past and the new, more modern style of drag. Something about him and his generation and his appeal to the public, because surprisingly he found he had a great appeal for the public, and when he eventually took the drag off, no one had seen him out of drag. The drag came off and he was still the same person underneath, with the same humour, the same quick wit, and he quickly became a household name here in the kingdom with his own chat shows, very, very successful. He would host game shows, took part in lots of musicals, actually, to his death. Until his death he was performing as Miss Hannigan again in Annie, and he had a lot planned for the future, so this has come out like a bolt from the blue. He received an MBE in 2008, and you can see him in the picture there. That's his husband on the left hand side, and to his right is his daughter, because he leaves behind a daughter that he fathered in his very early days, and he actually has some grandchildren as well. And he was married to a woman once upon a time, a lesbian chum of his who needed some help with documentation for staying in the country, I think, something along those lines. And I realise that it might come across as rather disrespectful to say this the morning after he's just died, but it's tough. It is what it is. I don't mean it disrespectfully. I actually mean it with every respect in the world for his talent. I never found him funny. That might surprise some of you. Humour reaches who it reaches and doesn't who it doesn't it? We all have different sensibilities. I would be quite able to sit there, stony-faced, surrounded by his adoring audience who are wetting themselves with laughter. It's just not my sort of comedy, because different things tickle the funny bone, don't they? Drag queens that I find funny are along the lines of, well, there's one that not many of you will have heard of here in the kingdom called Sandra. There's one, well, Lady Bunny is an American example of one that I find rather hilarious. And it's very rare, to be honest, that anyone can elicit a really big belly laugh from me, although when I go, I really go for it, my dear, and there's no stopping me. But laughing out loud is quite rare for me. So I didn't get that from him, but I always recognised his sparkling talent. His improvisational skills were second to none. He can come out and entertain a crowd at the drop of a hat. Had it all up here from all those years on the circuit, and I think he was fantastic. Just because it wasn't the sort of comedy I enjoyed, I still think that it was fabulous, and that he was a deeply talented, gifted entertainer that made a lot of people very happy, brought a lot of smiles to many people. So it's really regrettable that we've lost him already. But we celebrate a successful life, and I've no doubt that he'll be up there in the big shadow lounge in the sky with our Scylla, who was one of his besties. So, cheers. Prince Harry continued to rock up for his court hearings this week, even though he wasn't required to attend. Continued to rock up, extremely vulgar. And I noticed that 1,500 adults were polled by Newsweek magazine on March the 20th, independently by Redfield and Wilton, and it was found that 41% of Americans support the King turfing them out of Frogmore. Yes, 41% of Americans support it. Only 23% oppose that move, 19% don't know, and 17% don't care. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, Harold. And Harold had the temerity to accuse the royal family of keeping the fact that Harry was a victim of hacking secret, as it would open up a can of worms. Yes, he had planned to fly into the kingdom on the very day of the king's state visit to Paris, which happened to have been cancelled, but that was his plan. He was going to fly in on that very day and besmirch the royal family and steal all the headlines. How careless, how thoughtless. He blamed the institution for his delay in bringing legal action against the newspapers that he accuses of unlawfully gathering information about him. He todgered his way in to provide a witness statement. Todger. Yes, I'm going to show them how it's done because I'm the true Henry the Ninth. Todger. He todgered his way in. Todger's here, he todgers there, todgers every bloody where. Well, he's not todgering around me. Can we get that quite right? Can you get that quite straight now? Keep your todger to yourself. He says in this witness statement, as a member of the institution, the policy was to never complain, never explain. Yeah. Someone didn't send you the memo, did they, my dear? You've forgotten that one. There was no alternative. I was conditioned to accept it. For the most part, I accepted the interest in me performing my public functions. Oh, how regal of you, how gracious of you, Prince Todger. The institution made it clear that we did not need to know anything about phone hacking, and it was made clear to me that the royal family did not sit in the witness box because that could open up a can of worms. How dare you besmirch your own family on the day that was proposed for the King's state visit, or at any time? You really think you're the artful Todger, don't you? The fartful Todger's what you are, my dear, because you are full of hot air. And, well, two things. First of all, his claims and the claims of his associates, Elton and Sadie and all of them, have suffered a blow because it emerged that a key witness has denied his previous admission that he operated as a hacker for the Mail Associated newspapers. And this is strange because this person, this alleged hacker, this Gavin Burrows, did say in 2021, he said, I must have done hundreds of jobs between 2000 and 2005 for a certain journalist while he was at the Mail on Sunday. Hugh Grant, Prince Harry, Elizabeth Hurley, Elton John and his husband David Furnish and Sadie Frost were just a small handful of my targets. So he was a key witness. He sounds rather shady, I've got to say, sounds rather shady, in my opinion, allegedly. But it emerged yesterday that he signed a second witness statement last month in which he stated that it was false to say that he was commissioned by the Daily Mail or the Mail on Sunday to conduct unlawful information gathering. So seems like a very tricky character. That is a bit of a blow to their case. And it is also, as I've said before, a blow to their case that it's taken so long for them to come forward because these claims go back a hell of a long time. But this is the weird thing. It was Prince William. His uncaring family who told him not to worry about phone hacking and turn a blind eye, never complain, never explain. It was Prince William years ago that triggered the investigation itself into News of the World because the palace complained to Scotland Yard about Prince William's phone being hacked. Do you remember that interview with Tom Bradby? It's out there. Tom Bradby regales the story of how he imparted some information to William and it clicked in William's mind about all these stories that had been apparently leaking. He had suspected not his close friends but various courtiers, associates, other people, and some people at the palace had tried to trip them up and find out where these stories were coming from. It didn't cross their minds about voicemail hacking. Catherine's voicemails, I think, being hacked 135 times, whatever it was. This was years ago. William clocked when he was speaking to Tom Bradby and informed the police. An investigation was underway and, it went on to result in the closure of News of the World. So, hello, Harry. Knock, knock. Todger! Marquis of Tudge! Earl of Dumbo! King of Fools! No, you are not some renegade that is the only person in the royal family to want to take on the media. Charles has sued the Mail in the past and won. He's taken them on. William, Big Willie, not small, tiny, little, minuscule Todger. Big Willie, the future king. The future king, my dear, not the future King Henry the Naught. Goose egg, King Henry the goose egg, because it ain't happening. No one's going to lay that egg, except Rachel Ragland, and I don't want the omelettes that she's going to scramble out of that egg, my dear. It's all been done before by those that are bigger and better than you, my dear. You todger your way in like some kind of the renegade. Up with the rhythm of the renegade master. The king has been immortalised in a new oil painting by Alistair Barford, the first of the king's reign. The portrait was completed in just 2 weeks after studying Charles at a reception in February. Do you remember that biodiversity reception that we spoke about, where he was greeted by an Amazon indigenous leader? Well, that leader gifted Charles a bracelet, and the artist included this bracelet within the portrait. The artist said, "I wished to capture Charles's warmth and sensitivity, the empathy which comes across in his interactions with the people he met. It was important that I captured a sympathetic expression." What do you think of it? I don't think it's a great work of genius, I've got to tell you, but I've seen worse. Not too bad this part of the face, but I don't think he got the mouth quite right. It reminds me of little wiggle mouths that you get in cartoons. Although he does get a bit of Charles's famous Eeyore expression. And I must admit, as much as you know that I love many things about Charles, but the haunted Eeyore look does get on my nerves as much as anybody's, my dear. It's one reason why I do kind of secretly wish that we had Queen Anne. As much as I do adore so much about Charles, I'm not going back on anything I've said about him. I love him to bits, but when it comes to preserving the monarchy, I think Queen Anne would have been rather wonderful. Anyway, I digress. It's okay as a portrait, isn't it? You know, I suppose he scrubbed it up in 2 weeks. This artist did paint the late Elizabeth during her reign. I think it was in celebration of her becoming the longest reigning British monarch. The king is in Germany for 2 days, and he'll be taking in Berlin and Hamburg, and it looks like he's going to be able to catch up with his cousins, because he's got some cherished cousins in Germany. The state banquet being held in his honour, which might have already gone on by the time this airs, is going to be hosted by the president and his wife, who are personal friends of Charles and Camilla, and this will be going on at Bellevue Palace. And the king's cousins, if they happen to attend as well, and they are first direct cousins of the king, include Prince Rainer of Hesse, Princess Clarissa of Hesse, Prince Georg of Hanover, and Prince Ludwig of Baden. It was the late Prince Philip who was uncle to the Prince and Princess of Hesse and to Prince Georg, via his sister Sophie. She was Princess of Greece and Denmark, and Prince Ludwig is the son of Prince Philip's other sister, Theodora. And Theodora's grandson, who is also Charles's first cousin once removed, is Bernhard, the hereditary Prince of Baden. And there's also the grandson of the late Duke of Edinburgh's elder sister, Princess Margarita, whose name is also Philip, but with 2 P's at the end, Prince Philip of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Charles has also been announced as the new Colonel-in-Chief of the Corps of Royal Engineers, commonly known as the Sappers, and of course he takes over from the late Queen. And these Royal Engineers operate at the forefront of innovation to provide global military engineering and technical support to the British Armed Forces and their allies. And did you notice in this photograph he had the look of the vampire? You can always see the bloodthirsty lips, can't you? I don't know. Just at first glance I got that look, and a few of you have said in the comments, have you noticed that there's a sort of vampiric look to Charles here and there? And I can see exactly what you mean with the sort of slick back grey hair now. As he ages, he looks more like a sort of elderly and quite charming Count Dracula, doesn't he? Well, apparently he's got ties to Dracula because he's related to Vlad the Impaler, who was the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula, or is said to be so I believe, so I'm told. Yes, he is the great-grandchild, 16 times removed, through Queen Mary of Teck. who was the consort of King George V. And Vlad the Impaler was, of course, that 15th century brutal leader who impaled his enemies on wooden stakes, torturing them with a death that lasted up to 3 days. That's nice, isn't it, my dear? Good Lord. But something altogether nicer and more palatable is the revealing of the coronation floor. Did you see the exquisite photographs? This is quite exciting because for the first time in a long time, you're going to get the chance to walk all over it if you happen to be in the kingdom. Because for about 10 weeks, I think, after the coronation, you will be able to, if you take your shoes off and in small parties, small groups, you'll be able to walk over the coronation floor, the area in front of the altar at Westminster Abbey, which is used for the coronation, including the little circular point where every monarch in Westminster Abbey has been crowned. Yes, you can stand on that point in your socks, in your smelly old feet and socks, my dear. Please wash them before you tread all over it. I hope precautions are going to be taken. And it's been hidden from view from a very long time, this beautiful, intricate, one-of-a-kind floor, historical floor. It wasn't even seen at the late Elizabeth's coronation because it was covered up by some dusty old rug. It's known as the Cosmati pavement, named after an Italian style of work, the Cosmati work. It was laid in 1268. That's history for you, isn't it, my dear? By order of King Henry III. A proper king, do you hear me, Henry Wales? The workman who created it was shipped over from Rome, and the complexity and the subtlety of the design and the workmanship could be seen nowhere else on this scale. It's a 25-foot square piece featuring opaque coloured glass, onyx, marble stones, green serpentines, limestone, all sorts of jumble, my dear. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's moved some people and curators to tears because of its ancient provenance and its beauty. A sort of abstract style, beautiful. The colours outrageous. Princess Beatrice was out and about in cockatrice as she skipped out of Lulu's, that wonderful den in Mayfair, that den of iniquity, and the press were making something of it because she happened to coincide her visit there with an old flame. Yes, she did. An old flame of hers, an old buddy, an old chum, Dave Clark. They brushed shoulders. He with his new flame, and of course it was very convivial, I'm sure nothing underhand going on there. And of course she is very royal in her way. She wore black and she accessorized with those sorcery eyes. Now, if you don't care to hear about the trial of Sanderson versus Paltrow, then you can switch off now, my dear. Run along with you, my dears, or if you think you're going to hate me for siding with her, then be off with you and be off with your head. Can always switch off, my dear. You don't have to get your fruit jumbles in a flap. But I am going to talk about Gwynny, because I know that some of you have been watching the trial with glee and interest, and yes, I was watching it for quite a while yesterday, I've got to admit to you. Having watched the testimony of Terry Sanderson, I have to say it's so disappointing when I hear from some of you that can't see through this scam of this trickster and can only see Gwyneth's snoot, her snootiness, and her abrasiveness and her privilege and blah, blah, blah. Well, none of that's a crime, my dear. Even if she's the shittiest person on earth, it's not a crime to be shitty. There are many shitty people out there. I thought that he was a piece of work. I thought that came across extremely clearly in his testimony. Began okay, but things went off kilter. And let it be said that if any of his misapprehensions, misjudgments are to do with historical brain damage that he has or any medical afflictions, and it goes without saying that I have sympathy for those, but as I always say, my sympathy for those with mental difficulties ends when you heap harm onto other people, whether using it as an excuse or not. When you make it other people's misfortune for your own misfortunes, that's where my sympathy stops. I was not convinced by him, not for a moment. He actually gave me Thomas Markle vibes, although he's a completely different character. Basically, those of you that fall hook, line and sinker for everything that Thomas Markle Sr. tells you are going to feel a great deal of sympathy and empathy for poor Mr. Sanderson, because Gwyneth didn't tell him, no matter what happened, Gwyneth didn't ask him if he was okay. Oh, boo-hoo-hoo. Well, I believe her version of what happened, that he plowed into her And another reason why I believe her is because her witnesses were exemplary. Exemplary. If you watched her witness, if you watched the ski instructor of Apple and Moses, if you watched him testify, I'm sorry, my dear, yes, he's a paid ski instructor. Some of these witnesses are paid for their time. There was no doubt if you watch him. There was no doubt. Watching this ski instructor back up Gwyneth's version of events, there was no doubt that he is a good man, an honest man, a hard-working man. Sometimes it hits you instinctively. That was very clear to me. It was also clear to me that Dr. Stephen Edgley of the University of Utah, the director of stroke rehabilitation, it was very moving, if somewhat boring at times, to plough through his testimony, because he's is rehabilitating from a stroke himself, and it was actually very moving and very poignant to hear his testimony, his expert testimony, which backed up a lot of Gwyneth's claims. And also the biochemical engineer, Dr. Irving Sher, was magnificent. He was very compelling, and he backed up Gwyneth's version. He said that was consistent with the laws of physics, which is his speciality, whereas the version of Terry Sanderson doesn't even adhere to the laws of physics if his version was to be believed. So even if you've been convinced that Gwyneth Paltrow is nothing but a cruel, harsh liar who concocts stories, well, the testimony of these three individuals who have no particular attachment to Gwyneth Paltrow, they're not family members. Yes, one instructs their kids once every 3 years or whatever it is on the slopes for a couple of weeks, but has no cause or pressing reason to lie under oath, and these other witnesses certainly don't. Well, they were very convincing. In my opinion, Terry Sanderson either decided or was convinced by his cohorts to take her to the cleaners, because everyone just thought she'd settle. First for this $3 million that he asked for, second for this $300,000 which they're asking for. Some people saying, why couldn't Gwyneth just pay it? Do the right thing. They collided into each other. She didn't ask him if he was okay. She's a nasty person, so she should just cough up $300,000. I am fed up with people writing people off just because you think they're unpleasant and rich, that they should pay off some scam artist just for the pleasure of it. For what reason? I ask you, what is the world coming to? A scam artist, this nutcase. As for Gwyneth's legal team, that main lawyer of hers remains absolutely awful. He's got such an attitude on it. If you think Gwyneth's got an attitude on it, it's her lawyer that's got the attitude. It's her lawyer that's got the attitude, I tell you, the main lawyer. And he is so gross, snivelling and stuff. Okay, fair enough, he can't help it. Apparently he gets nosebleeds in high altitude, so he's going around with his nose dripping. He wears these manky looking old masks, COVID masks, and scratching away at his nose. It can't be helped sometimes, but it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it, isn't it? Like some creature, some critter, some mountain critter. I don't appreciate that, but what a breath of fresh air, because the other one on her legal team, who has been quite vocal recently and is much more competent, much better, he's the little junior part of the team, I think. Seems like a gay boy, not quite sure, but they're calling him the Clark Kent of the trial, the Clark Kent with braces, because he's a handsome little thing. Great husband material, I think. A fine young chap, and very good at his job, The other one goes on way, way, way too long, hammering even their own witnesses, but this one was very good. And I was looking through the comments, and they have swung from last week. The comments in the comment section, everyone criticising Gwyneth. And yes, I criticised her appearance. I criticised her physical clothing and appearance. So for those that think I'm some mega fan of Gwyneth, it's not about that. My point was that she wasn't presenting herself very well. And people were judging her. They were judgy last week. Well, the tides have turned in the comment section. My dear, the tides have turned. Some people have got their noses put out of joint because they made the wrong call. People need to hold fire and reserve judgment until facts are quite clearly known, or both sides have been heard, testimonies, blah, blah, blah. There is too much piling in. There is too much accusing everybody of being a narcissist in the whole wide world. Narcissist this, narcissist that, narky. We're all bloody narcissists. You're a narcissist if you write a comment to me, because who cares about your opinion? Who cares about your juicy comment? What a narcissist. You're going to make it. A River such a narcissist to think that he wants to invade on our time by doing a show, and how dare he wear blue and a brooch? What a narcissist. Must love himself. Who's going to escape scot-free now from the claim of narcissist, which is calling everybody in the whole wide world a narcissist? Well, the human race, I guess, then, is just narcissistic. Elizabeth Fraser, Dear River, I see some YouTubers calling King Charles a narcissist. Surprise, surprise! Surprise, surprise, Chuck! I do not see it. Good for you. Good for you, Liz Fraser. I knew you had your head screwed on. I do not see it. Could you speak to that? Well, there's no point in me denying it, because if I do, people just say, you're naive, River. You don't get it. Why do you think they smell of roses? So I will respond by reading out another comment that I got from another fruit. Connie Hopkins said, Dear River, I want to tell you how much I appreciate and admire King Charles. In 1976 or 77, he came to visit Charleston, South Carolina. I drove down from Columbia hoping to catch a glimpse of him. The corner where he was going to do a walkabout was absolutely packed with people, so I decided to walk a few blocks down to the School of Medicine, where I thought he was going. There was no one there but me standing on the corner. Oh, I know the feeling, my dear. So I quickly realised he wasn't going to the old medical school, but the new one. His car came down the road and turned right in front of me, and he leaned forward and waved to me. I thought that was so kind, because he didn't have to do that for just one young woman standing on the corner, but he did. What a marvellous smile he had. Well, he had those fabulous Windsor teeth back then, didn't he? They were proud as punch, they were, those teeth. Horsey. I was thrilled to see him face to face, and will always think the world of him for that brief moment of eye contact. I wish people would appreciate him more. I wish Harry would appreciate him more. Well, you can make up your own minds, my dear, whether or not that only backs up claims of his narcissism. Was he just flashing fruity Connie Hopkins a smile on the street corner as she stood there in South Carolina, waiting for a passerby? You know, was he just showing off, or was he being kind and making somebody's day? That the Prince of Wales, as he was, took the time for this lone girl on the street corner to flash a smile, make her feel important, and a memory that lasted a lifetime. That is the power of royalty, and that is the power of goodness. So you can guess my opinion on that matter. Oh no, everybody might have a little dash of narcissism within their psyche. Except me, my dear. I'm too pure to be pink for that kind of thing. But you know, writing everybody off as a narcissist. Now, only my opinion says, I don't really understand your adoration of Gwyneth Paltrow. She was an enormous talent. Enormous? But since her retirement seems to have devolved into silly self-absorption. Well, she's a businesswoman, my dear, isn't she? And a successful one. But as I said to you, I'm not sure how you get adoration from a balanced, reasoned point of view, which is my point of view, even if you don't agree with me. It is balanced, it is rather fair-minded. I made an entire video about her looking dreadful last week. That was the name of the video, that she looks dreadful, and that was what I was speaking about. So, you need to gain some perspective. Just because I can see shades in a story and to people's character, and just because I will defend those who are being besmirched at some points in time, that doesn't equate to adoration. We need to get some balance and perspective. Yeah, it's the same thing with Rachel Ragland. It's the same thing with Meghan Markle. There'll be months when I've made 9 different videos slagging her off together with the husband. And if I pop up with one saying, oh, by the way, I think this was rather unfair and I need to just defend this little thing that she did, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Since when did you become a sugar river? No, he's a sugar in disguise. He's being paid by Sunshine Bull Sacks. I mean, honestly, these Fruit Loops out there. Atonement 7232 says, look, we're not really going to know who's guilty here. I do. But I do know that accidents on ski slopes happen all the time, and when someone runs into you, you don't jump to the thought they're sexually assaulting you, and you don't then start yelling at them in anger while they're down. You ask them if they are okay. then you help them up if you can. If they are not okay, you call for medical assistance. I'm quite sure that you haven't watched the trial, because you seem to not really know what you're speaking of and seem to be taking one side of the story at face value, with respect. This poor guy, this Terry Sanderson, this poor guy even said, I'm sorry, according to Gwyneth, straight after the accident. And her response is to start yelling at him and to think she's being sexually assaulted on a ski slope. Let's just put that in perspective, my dear. No, she didn't say that she thought she was being sexually assaulted. We have to get facts right if we're going to discuss this. No, what she said was that on the point of impact, when she was impacted, so she says, from behind, the plows went through her legs. If any of you have had an accident or taken a tumble, you feel like it's in slow motion. There was one time I was running late for work at one point, and I was wearing formal shoes, and I tripped over a slab of concrete, and I fell down so fast that if my head had hit the ground, I would have died. It was because I was running at pace. It was a flat pavement, and the most magical, astonishing thing happened. Time slowed down. Time slowed down. Of course, time and space is an illusion, and it illustrated it to me, because it didn't, I don't expect it literally slowed down, but some sort of chemical emergency break or reaction in my body. It was one of the most magical moments of my life. It seemed to slow down time. My thought process became incredibly slow so that I could pick out exactly what was happening, and something in my body, it felt like I headed towards the floor, and about 10 inches from the floor, from the pavement, something bolstered me, like a field of energy bolstered me. And it was like I hit something rubber and bounded back up again. It was like a feeling of force against rubber. I bounded back up again without using my own musculature. Something kicked in, some physiological device that's evolved to protect me and my mind and my body. And in that moment, I could have thought a million thoughts. It happened in less than a second. It was a microsecond. Time slowed down. That's what Gwyneth's getting at when she says that, in this split second, when this happened, and this person, she didn't know what was going on. It was a feeling of force and something coming between her legs. Some object coming between her legs. She's, a lusted after woman, or any woman, or men who feel vulnerable to other people. What other thought are you going to have in that moment? First of all, what is that? Second, this is between my legs we're talking about, that I'm feeling, sensing something on top of me. She said and described the fact that was just one of the thoughts that came to her, that is something going on, am I being attacked? And the nature of where it's taking place, could it be something sexual? To me, that seems reasonable. Maybe she is laying it on a bit thick for the trial, but if that thought flashed through her mind together with many others, then why shouldn't she mention it? So no, she didn't jump to the thought that she was being sexually assaulted. It was a flash of a thought that crossed her mind as a possibility, as a potential, as to what had just taken place. This woman is so narcissistic, she thinks a ski accident must be because she is famous, and people on the slopes run into her because they want her or something from her. It's very narcissistic. As for her child, Moses, her 2 children had 2 instructors. One of the instructors was with her 2 children down the slope. Most children go into a class of 5 to 8 children for ski lessons, so I'm pretty sure one instructor could handle 2 kids for 5 minutes while Gwyneth checked that the man who's semi-unconscious on the ground was okay. Gwyneth Paltrow is definitely guilty of being a really shitty person, that's for sure. Well, being a shitty person, if that is how you perceive her, is not a crime. You're surrounded by shitty people. You could be one yourself. And, I don't mean to disparage a viewer. You could be a very nice and valued viewer of mine. I don't know, my dear, but judging just from this comment only, I would say that you're a bit shitty. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. I pass the olive branch to you. This is just in respect of the way that I've received your comment and I'm reading out of it. You come across as a bit of a shitty person because you've come to a lot of conclusions that don't really stand on very strong foundations about a person. Have you listened to the testimony of his witnesses and him? And were you really brought round? Were you really brought round by him? Perhaps. Perhaps the jury will be too. Takes all kinds. if it was me, would I have started yelling somebody in anger and saying, what the F have you done, this, that and the other? No, I would not. I'm actually rather tempered and have more reserve in those sort of situations and sympathy for people who have caused drama or caused an accident. I don't get cross at things like that. So on the one side, perhaps I can take on the perspective of those who think that she is untitled and rude and a bit shitty. I can take on the fact that that might be possible. But I can also, and this is where I am fair-minded and logical and reasoned, also can take on what I've seen of him at trial, his anger issues, his personality issues, the things his own family say about him, the things that experts dispute about him and his injuries and his past and his mind and the location of where that incident took place, the logistics of it. I can also take that into mind and think, perhaps she had something to shout about. Perhaps she did. And perhaps it could have been justified. Because there is a code of conduct. There is a literal code of conduct for behaviour on the slopes that everybody is responsible for adhering to. And according to her witnesses, and according to the very expert skier that was watching up to the very last moment and saw Terry Sanderson heading for her, he was the one that was uphill, coming towards her at pace. According to him, it was Gwyneth who was skiing impeccably and responsibly, and it was the other party that was absolutely not. So if that was you, my dear, and you were adhering to a code of conduct that is accepted by the skiing community, and somebody else comes ploughing straight into you out of the blue, would you be feeling quite so clement towards them in your attitude? Possibly. Although Gwyneth Paltrow wasn't injured in the same way, she was still sore, and she went off and had a massage later in the day. People say how entitled she is going off for a massage. They say how entitled she is, complaining that she only spent, she lost half a day on the slopes. And they've made a great big thing about this online. Oh, she's so entitled. She lost half a day on the slopes. Who cares? That was in response to a legal question to find out what losses she might have incurred, which is a general question, would be asked to anybody. If she didn't mention the fact that she'd lost half a day's skiing, which is still a substantial amount of money, whether you're a multi-billionaire or a peasant, it's still a substantial amount of money. She is legally obliged to say what her losses are for the day. And, she felt sore and injured, and money was wasted that was spent on her and her kids. The prejudice against the wealthy is ridiculous. It's reverse snobbery. It's a loss no matter who she is, and it should have been reported, and she would have been perjuring herself and lying by omission if she didn't establish that fact, that yes, there was a loss to her. And remember that if her story is true, that he ploughed into her, that was a surprise. There was an element of surprise there. He came heading for her, so he wasn't surprised. He knew what was going on. Unless his mind went, or he's mainly blind. One of his eyes is completely gone. The other eye is partially sighted, so that's another thing they're bringing up in the trial. He can't really see. So yes, I'm sure he would have suffered and been in pain, but the shock element was not there in the same way as somebody who has just been brutally shoved from behind and fallen over backwards. Do you see? So that has an effect on your immediate response as well, doesn't it? Fight or flight. Well, sometimes you're going to go into fight mode and, what just happened? This has happened to me. Your breath's taken away from you. Hasn't had time to dissipate. Pebble Critter says, as a skier, if you're in contact with another skier, you stop, you stay, you don't take off. It's the proper thing to do. It's slope etiquette. Well, from what I can see, and from very good witnesses there, all etiquette was followed, and the only etiquette that was not followed was from Terry Sanderson, who went against the code of conduct and ploughed into her. I have no understanding of how this accident happened, so I have no opinion who is in the right, but I do feel Paltrow has a lot of family on the stand, so it feels like a bit of an ambush to the gentleman. Well, they didn't actually take the stand in the end. They provided written testimonies, Apple and Moses. So you could call that an ambush, or you could say that she's the one that's being ambushed. in pursuit of money. It's extremely hard in the States to win any case against celebrity, which is sad. So if you see some comments against Gwyneth, that's probably why. I found people in America tend to root for the everyday man, if you will. Yes, that's what's going on here. That's what goes on with Thomas Markle sometimes. They see the everyday man. And it is a form of reverse snobbery. And I'm someone that likes to root for the everyday man as well, for the underdog. So I get it, but some people are blinded by it and can't find their way out of it. Then again, there are people who will file suits thinking they can get money out of celebrities. Keep up your lovely broadcast, Rivet. You always keep your fruits smiling. Thank you, my lover. Thank you for that reasoned point of view. As you say, you have no understanding of how this accident happened. I think the problem is a lot of people are commenting on the goings-on without really watching the trial and just looking at the headlines. So that's what's getting my goat a little bit. Kathy Georgiou says, River, I believe Terry Sanders' lawyer to be weird and even cringe to watch. Well, I find all of them cringe, except for the Clark Kent one. And I think Gwyneth is nervous and angry because I believe her account of the event is true, and Sanders is simply trying to wring the money out of her. Well, yes, I mean, if we do find that Gwyneth's version ends up being the truth, which I believe that it is, I mean, can anybody really blame her for looking as if, she can't believe that she's been dragged into this complete gong show out of complete lies and contempt and malicious scamming? I mean, hopefully that would elicit a bit more sympathy for the gal. And nobody is pretending that she is perfect. Nobody is pretending that she has a flawless reputation everywhere. But to be honest, that's nobody else's business. She doesn't go through life harming other people, hurting other people, just because some people report that she seems snobby or with an air of arrogance because she's famous. You meet those types all day, every day. Sometimes you find that those people have an inner shyness or distracted by other things or introvert. Sometimes they're just plain mean. One of my closest friends, who I spoke to yesterday, and who I know will be watching this broadcast, is a director, a very accomplished director. She's famous for having a sort of ice maiden appearance and a look of being really rather unapproachable, intimidating. Everybody says to her, I found you so intimidating when I met you, so intimidating. And, we used to giggle over it and rather enjoy it. And actually, when I was at my secondary school and coming up through college, I had a bit of a reputation of being rather aloof. Some people still say that I look aloof when they don't know me. I rather enjoy it, so I play up to it, my dear. I play up to it. But anybody that knows her knows that she's very warm, very friendly, will talk to anybody. But she can look quite scary. She can look quite scary. You wouldn't want to mess with her. Yeah, well, actually, one of my siblings is like that. You wouldn't want to mess with her. But my friend is very warm. I'm very warm. I'd give anybody the time of day. They show me respect. I'll show them respect. But one can give off a certain air that has nothing to do with who you really are and how you're truly feeling. This is where people can get very judgmental of somebody like Gwyneth Paltrow. If she's actually been rude, truly rude to somebody, or ingracious, fair enough. But if she just has gazed around a room, she might be thinking could be doing anything. But is she actually directly trying to harm anybody or be mean to anybody directly? If she has, well, so be it. Consider this, says Deer Valley is the name of the ski resort in Park City, Utah. It's not a small resort, it's expensive and very high class. Celebrities and other wealthy people have homes along its slopes. I lived in Park City for 14 years and skied at Deer Valley all the time. Miss Paltrow's mother was a famous actress, Blythe Danner. Gwyneth comes from old Hollywood money. I'm not sure why she didn't just settle with her accuser. Most people do. Perhaps she wanted to take a stand against the alleged liars in the world, which would be commendable. It is commendable. I can't imagine ever paying anybody off if I knew that I was innocent of something they were accusing me of, whether it was $3, $300, or $3 million. So, yes, if she is telling the truth and if she is making a stand against scammers, good for her. $300,000 is a lot of money. I don't care if it's small change to her. It's a lot of money to just gift someone if you've done absolutely nothing wrong. So good for her. Yes, she could have made it just vanish. And that's what they were expecting, in my opinion. That's what they were expecting. Oh, she won't to go through all this ridiculousness, the besmirchment, she'll pay it off. Well, it's not working out that way. I mean, we don't know how it's going to come to a conclusion. They could bang Gwyneth up and throw away the key, my dear. I don't know, I don't know how it's going to pan out, but I certainly am very glad that I trusted my intuition in this case, and I make no apologies for sharing my feelings with you. Thank you for popping in to see me for a little gossip. If you'd like to quench my thirst, you can treat me to a martini and lemonade in the description box below. And I thank you most sincerely and raise a toast to you, bottoms up. Stay royal, channel the royal spirit, and toodle pip.